What's up, guys? Reynad back, and it's been a while since I made a YouTube video. So today what I wanted to do is, make one that talked a bit about game design and card theory and that kind of stuff, because, I made a few of those videos back in the day, and they seem to be pretty well received, and, considering, I'm now working on making my own card game, and considering the fact that we have Artifact coming out pretty soon, at least the beta for it, I figured like it would be a good time to talk about a concept that I feel like is really important to every card game that exists. And for that video, it's going to be the economy of a game. So for those guys that don't know, most of you started following me in my Hearthstone days. I actually come from the Magic the Gathering world and from that background. And for a long time, the way I paid rent was a combination of playing poker and playing Magic online. Almost all the Magic I played was done online. That's where I learned, good technical play for card games. And the thing about Magic Online, much like Artifact coming out, is that it has an open economy. It's one of those games where you can buy and sell and trade cards that you open with other players. And I kind of want to talk about, how that affects a card game, tie that into, how just basically compare and contrast the different economies in different card games and kind of their pros and cons. So let me fix this webcam quick. Can do this in one take as usual. And kind of ramble. Hopefully we end up with a good video. So the game that most people are used to when it comes to card games is Hearthstone, right? It's the most popular card game in the world, at least for the digital space. And Hearthstone really kind of innovated the card game economy because it was the first real digital card game that was popular. And the biggest thing it changed, a lot of people think it's the mana system or like the fact that it used digital mechanics, but really the biggest thing it changed from traditional card games is that it had a closed economy. This is something that's very unique. So what I mean by a closed economy is you throw your money over time into the Blizzard incinerator, $200, $300, $400, you buy packs, and what you end up with are cards on your account only that you can't trade at all or take out of Hearthstone in any way. And I mean, that's great for, the guy in some dark room of Blizzard who's watching the, transactions across the screen while he rubs his nipples. But for, a player looking to transition to a different card game, that kind of hurts, right? Because you invested all this money into Hearthstone or Shadowverse or Elder Scrolls, whatever card game it is that you play, and these games with closed economies don't let you take your cards out and either pull out of card games completely or move to a different game. And what that ends up actually doing is being great for player retention. It kind of encourages players to stick to your card game only once you've already invested into it. And this is why we've seen Hearthstone be so dominant in the digital card game world, because when it comes to other games with closed economies like Shadowverse or like Elder Scrolls, these players that have already invested in Hearthstone really don't want to move to another card game because they've already put a bunch of money into Hearthstone and they don't want to move to a new card game where they have nothing because they feel like they'll be at a disadvantage when they start playing, and they'll feel like they'll all this work that they've put into their Hearthstone collection, they can't really move over. So Artifact and traditional paper card games are very different. They have an open economy, right? You invest money into cards so that you still have the same upfront cost to getting involved with the game. But then if you want to pull out of the game or leave, you can actually sell your cards, to either Steam in the case of Artifact, other players in exchange for Steam money, or in the case of traditional card games, you can sell your cards for cash. And truth be told, that's where most of the money in Magic is, right? You're not going to make money as a pro player off of tournament winnings. There's no money in that. But if you're, you start a business where you're buying, selling, trading cards, and you're a card vendor, there's actually decent money that you can make doing that. So, so I kind of wanted to, talk about this when it comes to Artifact, because this is really one of the biggest changes from Hearthstone that it's making, but it's not like a new innovation. It's kind of going back to the old style of card games, the Magic and the Yu-Gi-Ohs and the Pokemons of the world. And it's doing it digitally, which, again, Magic Online has already done. So there's two ways I think this will really affect Artifact, two big differences. So first of all, it actually kind of hurts player retention, because if I'm somebody that pumped a lot of money into a card game and I get bored of the game, I can just pull my money out and buy other games. And considering Valve, owns Artifact, that's probably okay with them, because from a business standpoint, it's not like they're withdrawing it into cash and then giving that money to Blizzard. They're selling their cards for Steam money, which they're, again, giving to Steam. So, I think from Valve's standpoint, once they initially buy into the game, that's it's still within the Valve ecosystem that money is staying, which is great for them. Although, to be fair, if somebody's buying games through Steam, a lot of times Valve is only taking 30% of that. So it's not ideal for them. In the case of Hearthstone, once they give you money, Hearthstone keeps 100% of that money. But it's just something to think about, And then when it comes to the Bazaar, it is a closed economy, right? You like Hearthstone, you put money in, you can't withdraw it or sell your cards and move to other games. But it's also a game where you don't own cards, right? You're not collecting these card assets. You're unlocking a character like in League of Legends or something. And then every game you're building a new deck from a pool of cards associated with that character. So, I think the nice thing about the model with the Bazaar is if you're a Hearthstone player or if you're an Artifact player or whoever, you don't feel like you're at a disadvantage starting from game one, because it doesn't matter how much money somebody's put into the game. They don't own better cards than you. They just own more characters, but you can only play one character at a time. The characters are balanced, right? It's no more pay to win than any MOBA in the world. So I think that's really the advantage of the Bazaar. I think players wanting to try a different card game won't feel like they can't move because they've invested too much money into Hearthstone, and they'd be at a disadvantage in a new card game. So I think that model's really good for existing card game players to at least try it out and see if they like it. At the same time, player retention wise, I think we have that closed economy, but the money that you're spending is going towards cosmetics. So I think it's not necessarily, our economy doesn't help player retention the way that Hearthstone's economy helps player retention. But once you've invested money into an account and you own skins and you own all the characters and you like the game, I think that's incentive enough to keep playing it. So now with Artifact, it will be kind of the anomaly in the card game world. It's an open market, and I kind of want to talk about how that affects, not just the business side of things, but how that affects gameplay for you guys. Because, coming from playing a lot of Magic Online, I noticed a lot of ways that kind of open economy affects the metagame and how it affects, you guys getting the decks and the cards that you want. I've tried everything from, like day trading cards, buying and selling regularly, to like as a vendor to make money that way. I've literally manipulated the Magic Online economy as a streamer, like literal stock market manipulation, basically, but in the world of children's card games. I would buy a card at 5 cents a piece. I would buy hundreds of them, and then I would make a competitive deck with them on stream and stream it a lot. And I would bump the value of the card up to about 40 cents, and then I would sell hundreds of them. There's lots of little interesting ways that I've tried to game that system, and there's ways that I've seen it, really affect the metagame, and I wanted to bring those up. So first of all, when it comes to an open economy, a lot of times you end up with a higher upfront investment if you want to play like a tier 1 deck with all the cards. So what I mean by that is, like, if I want to play the absolute best deck in Hearthstone, the best deck in Hearthstone, sometimes it's something like Quest Rogue, and it'll just play a couple legendaries or one legendary, for the old builds, and it's a very cheap deck. Like, it's not very expensive. Like, the Hearthstone metagame in no way is affected by what deck is the most expensive, right? Like, Control Warrior with 1 million legendaries will be like the most expensive deck, but it'll only be like tier 3 or tier 2 most of the time. So, a lot of times, or like Zoo will be the best deck in the game for like multiple metagames, but it'll be dirt cheap to build. So with Hearthstone, how expensive a deck is doesn't really correlate with how good a deck is. The metagame is what it is. Just because a legendary is in a tier 1 deck doesn't mean it costs more than 1,600 dust to craft. Now, in a game like Artifact or Magic Online, the opposite is true. Whatever ends up being the tier 1 deck makes the cards in it more expensive. So like almost by default, the best cards end up being the most expensive, because in an open market, the cards for the best deck are the most desirable. So what you end up having is the best deck in the game is almost always the most expensive deck in the game, or the cards that are in the best deck become the most expensive. That actually affects the metagame in a massive way, because all of a sudden, if I want to play a tier 1 deck, or if I want to play the best deck in the game in Artifact, I have to shell out a lot of money. And it affects the metagame on the low end in a very significant way too, because what you end up seeing is the deck with the best competitiveness to cost ratio ends up being grossly overrepresented in the metagame. So, I saw this a lot with like the modern format back in the day in Magic Online. There was a Daybreak Coronet Pants deck where you play a dude and you buff him a million times, and you get rewarded for buffing your dude, and you just try to cheese your opponent out. And initially that deck was really, really cheap because it was decently competitive, but the cards in it weren't very expensive. You could build it like in a very affordable way, until the deck became so popular because of its being affordable that the deck all of a sudden stopped being cheap, and everybody started paying a lot for the cards in it. It's kind of an endless cycle of, the metagame figuring out what's best, and then the prices kind of correlating with that. But I guess what I'm saying is, in a game like Artifact, you can expect the decks that are cheap but still very competitive to be overrepresented in the metagame. Whereas in Hearthstone, the cheaper decks are kind of going to be more common. You're going to see them played more at lower ranks. But at the end of the day, especially at high ranks, it's the price of a deck doesn't really affect the metagame too much. Whereas, in a game with an open market, the price of a deck like drives the metagame in a lot of cases. Or the quality of a deck drives the economics. They're very connected. So it's just a very interesting element, I think, for the game that we'll kind of have to see how it plays out. But honestly, I expect it to play out just how it does in Magic Online. And I'm not saying either system's better or worse. They're just different at the end of the day. And I think people can kind of expect, whatever ends up being like an efficient, cheap aggro deck, maybe it's mono red or black red or something. People can kind of expect that deck to be a little overrepresented in a lot of cases. But yeah, I think all three of these games are great. I think, with the Bazaar, Artifact, Hearthstone, they all bring different and great things to the table. And as much as people want to talk about them competing with each other because they're all card games, the truth is the card game genre is a lot deeper than people think it is. It's just not as explored as other types of games to date. Cards are some of the first games humans ever made, right? Cards are just a way to simulate randomness in a gamified way. We've been playing card games for hundreds and hundreds of years. The truth is, I think Artifact and Hearthstone and the Bazaar, all three of them, I think they don't compete with each other as much as people think they do. The reason being for that is, it's like comparing, Metal Gear Solid and Fortnite and Call of Duty, right? Like, they're all games where you shoot people and there's guns and stuff, but, one's single player, one's like a building battle royale that's family friendly. Call of Duty has battle royale too now. Let's say Counter-Strike is the third example, right? They're very different, but they're all shooters, right? The thing is, the shooter category is broad enough that, there's third person, first person, there's single player campaign, there's multiplayer, there's battle royale, there's search and destroy modes. There's just so much variety within the shooter world that, I think a lot of those games don't compete with each other just because they appeal to different audiences. They bring different things to the table. And once you actually dive into the gameplay, it's noticeably different, and it appeals to different audiences. All those games bring different things to the table. So, yeah, I guess, my point is we're kind of seeing the growth of the card game genre, and not the oversaturation. I think people are figuring out different ways to address that market that has historically really appealed to a small group of people, right? Historically, it's like Magic players and Yu-Gi-Oh players and Pokemon players that played in their local gaming stores. Those are the people that played card games. But the great thing that Hearthstone did is it gave us the first good digital build of a card game, and then that really opened the genre up to a way bigger audience. And now that there's a much bigger audience for card games that is open to the idea of playing them, we can have the artifacts and the bazaars of the world come in and, appeal to different parts of that market and continue to grow it too. So, just kind of a rambly video. Hopefully you guys like it. I figured it's been a while since I put something out on YouTube, and I kind of wanted to talk about the economics of different card games. So, feel free to hit me up, in the comments with some questions, or, wherever this is, on Reddit and social media, hit me up. Be happy to answer some thoughts, and hopefully the next video I give you will be a little bit more structured and direct. This one is a little bit more rambly, just some stuff I've been thinking about. But yeah. Oh, and I guess before I go, I'll give you a quick update on the Bazaar side of things. The game is coming along very well. So the pre-production stuff is getting done. We have finished the networking side of things. You can log in, you can see numbers move around. So it's the first build we have with networking, which is exciting. Aiming to have a a solid playable build within about 4 months that I can start grinding a million games with other people online. That's really the stage where different mechanics are going to start getting fleshed out, and we'll get a good feel for the play of the game. I'm considering simplifying it a little bit more. I want the game to be a little less daunting when you first look at it. I want people to be able to learn it, in 5 minutes fairly quickly. I'm considering reducing the number of stores to 3 per player, but then increasing the amount of card velocity, like basically introducing more mechanics into the game that let you churn through different stores much more quickly. So there's less stuff on the board, but you're seeing more cards overall. So it should be more decision making, but a simpler UI at the end of the day. But yeah, let me know if you guys have questions about that as well. I'll keep you up to date. It's just kind of in this limbo period where there's not too much visual stuff to show you just yet. But thanks for watching. See you next time. Have a good one. Peace.